Okay, we're back. I'm back with my favorite person to talk to about all things supplements, health and fitness, my friend Jerry Brainum. Jerry has the best newsletter on the planet for the best nutrition supplement advice, training advice, anything related to anti-aging, health and fitness, appliedmetabolics.com. I've been a subscriber for probably over 10 years now. And it's great because you're extremely comprehensive with every topic. And then you also have a Cliff Notes version at the very bottom. So one thing I usually do is if I see a topic you hit on that is interesting to me, I'll go read the Cliff Notes version first just to get an idea of where you're going and what the synopsis is. And then if that's really interesting, I'll go back and read the whole thing. If I felt like I got what I needed from the synopsis, then I just move on to the next article. So you do a really good job of providing really comprehensive information for people who want details. And then for people who just want a quick summary of what's this article about, you can go to that too. So I like that. You do a really good job at that.
Well, I try and make it very practical. In other words, there's a lot of topics, Mike, that I come across because, to do this Applied Metabolics publication, I probably look through maybe 100, 200 different scientific journals a month. I come across a lot of topics I find extremely interesting, but they really have no practical value. In other words, they're either extremely technical, which would, I could try and simplify it, but even if I tried to simplify, it would still be above the heads of 90% of the readers, but more importantly, it's not stuff that somebody can apply right away. So when I try and write about topics that people can use right away that'll improve their workouts, improve their health, I do write about anti-aging because there's a lot of guys that, are getting back into weight training. They're 40, 50 years old. They need help. And I also believe, from what I understand, the baby boomer generation, which I am in, I think that started in 1947 to 1957. I can't remember, but these people have a much greater interest in staying healthier longer. In other words, they want to keep their teeth, they want to keep their cognition, their brain. And, so I try and write stuff that will help them do that. I quickly hasten to add, I'm not going to say you could stop the aging, but that's a pet peeve I have, because a lot of these videos, they'll lead you to believe we found the answer to aging, or we can reverse aging now. I mean, if people get this mental image of, wow, a 60-year-old guy will be thinking, wow, I can go back to being 20. No, that's not going to happen, pal. I mean, they did the same thing with growth hormone, if you remember years ago. They were trying to say that growth hormone was a fountain of youth hormone because the seminal study, which started the whole growth hormone industry, a 1990 study in the New England Journal of Medicine, Daniel Rudman was the lead author. He gave men who were diagnosed as having growth hormone deficiency, he put them on growth hormone, and sure enough, they started getting more muscle. They lost about 14% of their fat, and their skin got thicker. So a lot of the lines looked like they were receding. So it gave the initial impression of them being younger, right? Now, this started the whole cottage growth hormone industry, the anti-aging clinics and all that. And growth hormone got their reputation of being anti-aging hormone, right? But see, what people don't realize is that there was a follow-up study. When these same men got off the growth hormone, everything regressed back to the way they were before. And another important point about that study that's often overlooked is that these men were clinically deficient in growth hormone. It's a different situation. If you're already, let's say, making enough growth hormone for your body, taking growth hormone is going to do surprisingly little. They've shown this in young bodybuilders and Olympic lifters. They gave them growth hormone. All right, they didn't give them the massive amounts that some bodybuilders take, but they gave them, let's say, an average amount of growth hormone, and the growth hormone had no anabolic effect whatsoever. Why? Very simple. These people were already making enough growth hormone. It was like trying to pour water in a glass that was already full. So the bottom line is that growth hormone works best if you're already deficient, but with the proviso, don't take growth hormone with the hopes that it's going to completely regenerate you. I mean, it will help in certain things. Growth hormone and IGF-1, they do maintain the neurons in your brain. They help maintain your heart health and all that. That is important as you age, but Don't expect this. I don't like the gross exaggeration that occurs with a lot of this anti-aging stuff. These nostrums, take this, take what is it called, NMN, and it's gonna, they gave it to mice and it I mean, I'm not saying that stuff doesn't help in some ways, but I don't like the way they exaggerate it and just, they lead people to believe that it's going to completely regenerate everything. That's my pet peeve with that stuff. My point
with growth hormone, you're saying that if someone's in the normal range, let's say they're in the middle of the range and they go to the high end of the range taking growth hormone supplementation, that's not going to do that much benefit.
No, it's not going to do that much. Now, there is a situation where, for example, bodybuilders and athletes, this started maybe the 90s, they started taking growth hormone, insulin, and huge amounts of steroids. For some strange reason, I call that the anabolic triumvirate. Yeah. That started producing these gigantic physiques, because right after they started using that combination, you started seeing bodybuilders on stage, 5'10", weighing 290 pounds, with no fat, no body fat. I mean, you see the average guy, 5'10", 290 pounds, he'd be a blimp.
Yeah.
So, there is a synergistic effect. That's my point. When you take growth hormone with steroids and with insulin, there is some sort of synergistic effect. But now, if you're talking about growth hormone alone, no, growth hormone is not as anabolic as most people think. Furthermore, there's certain researchers, a school of research, let's say, where I can't remember the guy named Andre Barque, something like that, out of Illinois. He's published a couple of studies based on animal studies showing that animals that are actually relatively deficient in growth, they're like dwarf mice, because they don't have growth hormone, they're very small, but they live 30% longer. And the same with an IGF-1 in animals, if you block the IGF-1 receptors, or you make IGF-1 a little bit less effective, they also live longer. So, in other words, the point being, the very thing that a lot of people are taking, like growth hormone and IGF-1, that they think are going to extend their life, might be working in reverse and shortening their lives. So, Sylvester Stallone, if you're watching this video, take heed, because I understand he likes to use growth hormone. I mean, the guy looks pretty good for his age. He's like 77. What is he? He looks great, but he's into working out. He stays slim. That has a lot to do with it. But but I don't want anyone to think that I'm against growth hormone use. If you have a need for growth hormone, if you're an older person who's shown to be clinically deficient in growth hormone by lab testing, taking growth hormone will make a difference. You will feel better and you'll feel healthier. You might even feel a little younger. But again, if you're growth hormone deficient, for a young guy to take only growth hormone, I remember the 1990 Mr. Olympia, it was the only Mr. Olympia that was drug tested. So a lot of the guys, this is off the record, told me when I spoke to them, they had to get off the steroids, let's say, as much as a month before the contest to pass the drug test. So some of them decided to there was no test for growth hormone. So they stayed on growth hormone all the way up to the contest. And I asked them, so what do you think it did for you? And they said it didn't do anything as far as muscle size, but it did help me maintain what I built from the steroids and my training. In other words, it preserved their muscle. And that's what growth hormone really does. It preserves muscle. It does preserve muscle. It does do that. For example, if you go on an extended fast, how a lot of people are into intermittent fasting. Well, if you go on a longer fast, let's say you decide to go on a fast for 2 days or more, 48 hours or more. At the 48-hour mark, your body's going to start kicking out a lot more growth hormone. And it does that as a means of, it doesn't want you to lose lean mass, muscle. So it'll kick out growth hormone to oppose the cortisol levels, which will be increasing because you're not eating any food. And it also will help you retain muscle by sparing amino acids and all that stuff. So growth hormone is really good. And by the way, so is insulin. People think that insulin is an anabolic hormone. Little do they know, insulin is only anabolic when you have a large amount of amino acids in your blood. Then it will stimulate, because insulin does stimulate the entry of amino acids into the muscle. But in other circumstances, insulin is categorized as permissive, meaning it helps to maintain muscle, it preserves muscle. So it's anti-catabolic more than anabolic. See, that's the thing with insulin. So that's the way but people have a lot of misconceptions about these hormones. You know?
Yeah, I think there's way too much expectation too, because the benefits have been exaggerated so much. A lot of the clinics, they're going to exaggerate the benefits of everything they offer. They're going to show pictures of some old jacked looking grandpa, where from the neck up looks like someone's grandpa, from the neck down looks like a Chippendale bottle or dancer, right? It's just shredded.
Right.
I mean, some people could probably achieve that, but they're given the impression that anyone who gets on this protocol is going to achieve that.
Right. That's the part I don't like. It's very misleading. Yes, growth hormone unquestionably will help you feel better if you're deficient. You're older person, you're deficient. And
they're deficient.
Right, and not everyone gets deficient in growth hormone.
Right.
See,
Right.
I mean, it's just like testosterone. I mean, the way things are today, they lead you to believe every man, as soon as he hits 40, his testosterone drops like a rock, and he should get on testosterone replacement therapy. That's not necessarily true. It's true about maybe half or 30 to 50% of men, their testosterone levels, but let's say when they hit about 40, 45, they start to get low enough where maybe if they get on testosterone replacement, they will feel a little better, and they will, get a lot of the benefits of testosterone. Don't get me wrong, but it's not true that every man. Some men are like 70 years old and still have normal testosterone level. And strangely enough, a lot of it has to do with body composition.
Yeah.
They found that you take an average guy, let's say takes a lab test, he shows that he's low in total testosterone, right? But he has a lot of body fat. If he goes on a diet, this is weird. If he goes on a diet and loses a substantial amount of body fat, then gets retested, he can actually show up. Now he has normal testosterone.
Right.
And there's a number, it would take too long to explain why, but having a lot of body fat does things that inhibit your testosterone production. Greater estrogen production has that feedback mechanism. So losing body fat alone could actually normalize testosterone levels. And a lot of men who are walking around with, let's say, borderline low testosterone levels or clinically deficient testosterone because they have too much body fat.
Yeah.
It's amazing. All you got to do is go on a diet and exercise.
Taking testosterone when you're really overweight possibly cause more issues because you have so much aromatase, you're going to convert a lot of that testosterone to estrogen.
Well, there's a lot of doctors who, they still have that bugaboo. A lot of doctors still believe that testosterone causes prostate cancer. So they prescribe testosterone. On the other hand, let's say the other doctors that do prescribe testosterone replacement therapy, when they get clearly obese patients with a lot of body fat, they'll start them on testosterone. Usually, a lot of them will start them on the topical versions. They don't like to give out the injections because of the kinematics of the testosterone injections. They give you, let's say, ananthate, cypionate. They are esters. In other words, they're designed to last supposedly a month, but it's actually 2 weeks where they'll give you elevated. But what happens is they peak in 48 to 72 hours, and then there's a gradual decline. So you have basically an uneven testosterone level. Whereas if you take the daily topical versions, you have a very even testosterone level, right? Now, the problem with from a bodybuilding standpoint is that it's very hard to get an elevated testosterone level with the topical versions. Some men do. They get as much as 800 total testosterone, but most men, and they're designed to do that. The doctors want you to be at the mid-range point. Let's say 500, they consider that ideal.
Yeah.
I think it goes from 300 to 1,000, depending on which which one you look at. But to answer your question, let's say a guy's obese and he's shown to be, through lab testing, to be low in testosterone. A lot of the doctors will put him on a topical testosterone, but they'll also put him on an anti-aromatase drug like Arimidex, because what you're saying is correct. There is a danger that they're already producing estrogen because the aromatase enzyme is particularly rich in the peripheral fatty tissue areas like the legs and the arms. And if you add testosterone to that, they could be making too much estrogen, which could create problems like, the estrogen-related side effects, gynecomastia, all that stuff. So they'll
Yeah.
put them on a aromatase inhibitor. However, it's a mistake. A lot of doctors will put even lean guys on, as soon as they put them on testosterone, they'll put them right on an aromatase inhibitor. That is not a good idea.
Right.
That because you need a certain amount of estrogen. These things are very powerful drugs. Some of them knock out as much as 80 to 90% of estrogen, and it's not good for working out either, because it turns out you have there's two basic estrogen receptors where there's only one androgen receptor. It turns out that stimulation, I can't remember whether it's estrogen A or B, but one of the estrogen receptors directly stimulates satellite cells, which are muscle stem cells needed for the repair and growth of muscle. So lowering your estrogen level too much is not good for bodybuilding. Also, a lack of estrogen causes men to get increased fat in the visceral fat deposits, the deep-lying fat, which is a very dangerous type of fat. That type of fat, deep-lying abdominal fat, is closely associated with insulin resistance, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, as well as non-alcoholic fatty liver. So you got to be careful there.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's pivot and talk about some of the things I wanted to get into today. The popularity of turkesterone and the Edysterones. Now, these have made a huge resurgence. I remember last year there were probably dozens of new companies that just started pushing these products, mainly because this Huberman talked about it. Dr. Andrew Huberman talked about it with Joe Rogan on an episode. And a lot of supplement companies are popping overnight based on whether the product is mentioned on a popular podcast. And that's where we're at right now in the landscape. Because it's not about creating something that works or marketing something that works. It's about marketing something that can, or selling something that they can market.
Right.
And what we see with this, because you've been in the supplement industry long enough, and so have I, to know that there's a circular nature to the supplement industry where they'll try to sell, like 20 years ago, they tried to sell turkesterone and Edysterones, and it never took off then. People forgot all about it. Now it's made a resurgence, and it seems like there's multiple problems with these products. Even if they work, it seems that most of the ones on the market are severely underdosed. So the first question I have for you is, if they were at what is considered an efficacious dosage, would it be effective at that dosage, or does it not matter? Is it that these supplements are underdosed? That's the reason why they're not effective, or is it just that the ingredients are not effective to begin with?
Okay, a very good question. To answer the question completely, I have to go back a little bit in time and explain how these things developed in the first place. Ecdysteroids were actually they're found in both plants and in insects. Insects produce ecdysteroids to stimulate a process called molting, right? Well, the origin of ecdysteroids and turkesterone, all those things, they began in what was the Soviet Union and now Russia. Russian scientists were much more into the intricacies of biochemistry for sports than Western scientists. They looked at a lot of substances that Western scientists didn't even bother with, or didn't know about. Well, anyway, they came across the ecdysteroids, and they happened to notice that the molecular formula for ecdysteroids closely resembled the molecular formula of steroids, including testosterone. So based on that, they decided to give them to their athletes, like the East Germans, the Soviet athletes, even the Russian cosmonauts. They were given these ecdysteroid supplements, right? So further research showed the mechanism. Now, you know that steroids work, whether it's, steroids, by the way, is a general term meaning it's produced from cholesterol. That applies to testosterone, anabolic steroids, and so forth. All these steroids work by interacting with the androgen receptor. Once they interact with the androgen receptor, they go through the cytoplasm into the nucleus, and initiates gene changes, which result in the familiar anabolic effects, right? Well, it turns out that ecdysteroids do not interact with androgen receptors. And yet, this was the conundrum for the Russian scientists, because the initial studies, when they gave them to mice and lab animals, a couple of the studies, they compared ectosteroids to very famous steroids, including the king of all steroids, methandrostenolone, Dianabol. That was the famous, that's the steroid that started the whole thing in bodybuilding, It was Dianabol in the 60s. Anyway, they gave ectosteroids to these mice, and then they had another group taking the actual Dianabol, and then they compared the growth potential of the lean mass gains, and they were the same. And in some cases, and this is what's really startling, the ectosteroids produce greater muscle growth than the Dianabol. And that's like mind-blowing, because this is basically a natural substance, and it didn't seem to have any side effects. Because even back then, they knew that anabolic steroids had side effects, possible side effects. So then they had to come up with the mechanism. Well, let's see. It seems to stimulate muscle growth in these lab animals, but it doesn't interact with the androgen receptor. What's the mechanism? Then they found out what it was. The ectosteroids in the animals increased muscle protein synthesis substantially. Now, muscle protein synthesis is one of the cornerstones of muscle hypertrophy, like this stuff called the mammalian target of rapamycin mTOR. It works by kind of directing amino acids into an anabolic pathway that basically results in muscle hypertrophy. Anyway, this stuff, the ectosteroids, it didn't necessarily work with mTOR, but what it did, it worked with the downstream signaling components like AKT. There's a couple of them, you're probably familiar with them. These are the things that mTOR stimulates, these so-called downstream anabolic factors. Turns out that the ectosteroids stimulated these downstream anabolic factors. By doing so, it increased muscle protein synthesis in the animals. So then they took it, the next step was to give it to humans. And of course, they gave it to athletes. There was a couple of Russian studies I saw years ago, which found the same results. These Russian studies showed that the athletes who got these various ectosteroids seemed to make the same muscle gains as other athletes who were taking straight anabolic steroids. And they gave it to the cosmonauts to prevent the possible loss of lean mass on space missions. And then it trickled down into the United States, and that's when they started the ectosteroid supplements. Initially, there was a company that had an association with Russian suppliers. I can't remember the name of this goes way back. We're talking like late, maybe the 70s.
Okay.
They actually came out with ectosteroid supplements in the United States. They didn't catch on at all. It was a complete failure. I don't know. There was a couple of guys writing articles, but for some reason, maybe it was the fact that they were called insect hormones. It might have turned a lot of people might say, "Hey, I'm not going to use a stuff that insects use." I don't know why it didn't catch on, but it didn't. Anyway, like you say, it comes around in circles. It kind of like disappeared for a couple of years, and then recently emerged. Another ectosteroid called Turkesterone was singled out as having extremely anabolic properties above and beyond all the other ectosteroids. Now, there's another class of compounds called brasinoids, brasinosteroids. I think they're brasinoids, or they're found in actual certain vegetables, spinach, that work just like ectosteroids, where they do the same thing. They increase muscle protein synthesis. The reason they haven't been put in supplement form is because it's extremely expensive. To sell in a supplement form brasinoids would probably cost you a bottle of 60. I estimate would cost about $2,000. They're not going to sell very much, Maybe Elon Musk and Bezos might buy, but nobody else. But so anyway, the point is that Turkesterone got this reputation of being extremely anabolic, right? Now, here's the interesting part. There was no human studies whatsoever. To this day, there's not a single human study that shows that Turkesterone has vast anabolic properties above and beyond the other ectosteroids. And yet it's marketed that way, based strictly on word of mouth and anecdotal evidence. Of course, you have the it worked for me type of thing, the placebo effect, where, when you have the appeal to authority, which is a logical fallacy, where
Right.
somebody who seems to have a lot of educational background, PhD or an MD, if they say turkesterone is extremely anabolic, it'll produce the same effects as anabolic steroids without the side effects, you'll get a lot of people buying it based on them saying that. And then some of these people will actually make gains. They will actually make gains. And then they go online in social media. Hey, I use this turkesterone and I can't believe it. I put an inch on my arm and I'm getting stronger. And you know what? They're not lying. That's the interesting part. They're telling the truth. But it's not the turkesterone doing that. It's the placebo effect. What happens if you take a supplement, forget any supplement, if you take a supplement and truly believe, have faith in that supplement, that it's working, you will do subtle things, like you might slightly take in more protein. You'll train, say, well, the supplement's making me stronger. You'll actually push in the gym a little harder. You'll make a little bit of progressive resistance. You may increase your reps, increase your weight, and you wind up with real gains.
Right.
But the bottom line is, it wasn't from the supplement. It was your belief in the supplement that produced the gains. And this, to put it in a nutshell, that's turkesterone. And to make it even worse, this is the part that's really pathetic. A couple of people actually took turkesterone. This is not that long ago. They took several brands of turkesterone supplements, including those that are advocated or sold by very, very popular, what do they call them, influencers?
Yeah, right.
The term.
Yeah, influencers.
Have huge followings, and some of them are selling turkesterone. Their supplement were among those analyzed. None of the supplements contain less than 1% turkesterone.
Wow.
But not enough to do anything. And that kind of ties in with your question earlier, where does the dose make a difference? There was only, to my knowledge, there was only one study done when the ectosteroids hit the market years ago. A couple of some Western scientists got a hold of bodybuilders or recreational weight trainers. They gave them a supplement that contained ectosteroids. Unfortunately, it also contained other substances, so it really wasn't pure ectosteroid. They gave them the suggested dose, and then they gave them a placebo. They had them engage in a resistance training program. At the end of the study, there was no difference whatsoever, and they concluded that ectosteroids do nothing. It wasn't really that. I wouldn't call that a definitive study by any means. For no other reason other than the fact that they didn't give them the pure ectosterone. Now, what would happen if
the Russian studies? It sounds like it was shown to be very effective, the ecdysterones.
Yeah, and the Russian studies did. This is the interesting part. They did give them much greater quantities.
Right.
Because the Russians found, and the East Germans also did that, they found that even providing large quantities of these ectosteroids did not cause any particular, side effects. The little gastrointestinal effect, there was no major, not like steroids, where if you take huge amounts of steroids, you're going to have cardiovascular effects, liver effects. This didn't seem to happen with the ectosteroids. So the difference was when they gave, let's say, the substantial amount of ectosteroids, they did notice the same effects as the animals. They seemed to be an increase in muscle protein synthesis and an increase in muscle gains. But in other words, the dosages that are commonly used here are not the same. And also, as far as the turkesterone, the problem there is the supplements contain almost no turkesterone.
Right.
Of course, they're not going to do anything. What would happen if you took the let's say, a substantial dose of turkesterone? It might actually do something. But quite honestly, that's an assumption on my part. I'm you know, because I don't know anyone who's done
Remember the dosage of the ecdysterones? Was it in the grams? Because I think most are sold as milligrams, most of the products. 100 milligrams, 200 milligrams. Was it way higher than that?
about 100, 200 milligrams, no more
Okay,
than
that's what it was in the Russian studies.
it was what?
That's what it was in the Russian studies, 100 to 200 milligrams, something like that.
A couple of 100 milligrams in the rest.
Right, right.
Here
Okay.
they keep 100 milligrams. So
Right. And that's assuming that the product is actually dosed accurately, because there was I think an article on Ergolog that looked at several of the ecdysterone brands, not turkesterone, but ecdysterone, or is it ecdy? Is that how you say it? Ecdysterones?
Ecdysterones.
Yeah. Because they looked at a lot of those brands too, and those were all very underdosed as well. I don't think there was one that actually met the label.
Right. See, that's the problem with the ecdysterone. I mean, do they work? Maybe.
Theoretically, if a company actually used an efficacious amount in it.
Right, but that would raise the cost.
Right, right. So is that why it's probably lower? Is it cost prohibitive to real amount? Okay.
I would say it's cost prohibitive because then, while they're not as expensive as brasinoids, the steroids, if you start giving larger doses, they're a little bit more complex to put into a supplement compared to other things. So I'm not saying they'd be super expensive, but they'd be considerably more. If you gave the right dose,
right,
it'd probably be a little bit too not affordable for most people. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they give the smaller dose and they lie and say that it's going to produce similar effects to steroids.
Yeah, usually a smaller dose, and then there's some kind of proprietary blend where they mix a bunch of other things in it, so you don't know how much of each ingredient is available either. Yeah, that's a common one.
That's one of the biggest peeves I have with supplements, that proprietary blend stuff, because you have no idea how much they're giving you. It could have not enough active ingredient to feed an ant, and you know they have a bottle where they list like 30 different ingredients,
right?
And they charge $70 to just look at it. We're giving you 30 different things, right. So we're going to charge you
more things they can talk about in the marketing. Now, that's one of the purposes behind that.
Right.
So what I like to call the kitchen sink approach. You remember, this is a little bit of a tangent, but we'll bring it back. But you remember that product Hot Stuff in the 1990s?
Yeah.
Everyone in my generation, because that came out when I was in high school, everybody used that. And I remember the first time those of us used it, we noticed a pretty big increase in strength on different things we were doing. We're all bench press specialists back then. But I remember on subsequent batches, it never worked. Right. And the rumor is that it had some kind of anabolic in it. And they did a bait and switch. So the first several batches had maybe methyl testosterone or something like that in it. And then they did the bait and switch where once it started selling really well, they go, okay, we're going to be under some scrutiny. So let's take that magic ingredient out. And then the whole thing folded not too long after that, because people are, supplement users are not as dumb as supplement companies would like to believe, meaning that you're not going to keep taking something if you don't get any measurable benefit.
Right, that's true. Well, a similar thing, I think, did I ever tell you, I told you the story with the MetRx?
Yeah. Dr. Scott Connolly. Yeah, that was another one.
Yeah, I was given the original MetRx. It came in 2 large tin cans.
Yeah, the base and the plus. Yep.
Base and the plus. I was told to take a scoop of each.
Right.
And I used it. And I was told that, it was a meal substitute. And I wanted to lose weight. So I used it for about 6 months. I literally ate no food. I lived on that stuff.
Really?
Right?
Wow.
And here's the thing. Normally, I could not live on a protein powder alone without starving myself, right? I mean, protein does provide satiety, but you can't do it all the time. Yeah. So, but on this thing, there was something in that formula, that original formula, where I literally wasn't hungry. As a result, I dropped 35 pounds, lost about 5 inches on my waist, and I hardly lost any muscle. I'm not going to say I didn't lose any muscle. Yeah. I would say 5%, which is considered acceptable.
Right.
So when they came out with the commercial version, which was, I think, Bill Phillips combined with Connolly, maybe I'm wrong about that. They came out with a commercial version, came in packets.
Yeah.
I tried that, and again, I said, well, I want to lose a couple of pounds. I'm going to go back on the metric. Starved, couldn't do it. It didn't even last one day.
Yeah.
And I did an interview with the guy who developed the product, Scott Connolly, and I asked him. I said, was there something in that original MetRx formula that kind of had an appetite suppressant effect? And I told him my experience. I said, I just wasn't hungry. First, he tried to say it was the protein. I said, no, no. He had me call him Scott. I said, Scott, it wasn't the protein because I've tried all kinds of protein. They have a temporary appetite suppressant effect, but it doesn't last that long. So this one lasted for 6 months. So I said, let me ask you a flat out question. And he was sitting with a woman who he said was a nurse. I remember we were in a restaurant. I said, let me ask you a flat out question. I heard a rumor that the original prototype, the one I used, the MetRx, had a little extra clenbuterol added.
Yeah.
Now, clenbuterol, as you know, is a slimming drug.
Right.
I'm not sure of its effect on appetite, but it definitely promotes short-term fat loss.
Right.
So he looked at me and he just smiled, and he looked at the nurse, and they both smiled at each other. And and then he goes, next question.
It's very incriminating. He didn't flat out say no.
Say no, and he didn't say yes. So I said, should I take that as a yes? He says, you can take it any way you want. So I don't know. All I could tell you is that stuff did have something in it.
Yeah, I never used that early batch because it was not affordable for me as a college student, I believe, when that came out. So I didn't even get a chance to do it. But people I know who used it said the same thing that you did.
Right. But
to recap, you said you used it for 6 months straight as the only form of. What happened when you went back to eating regular food? Was that a shock to your system, or?
After about 2 months, I started gaining the weight again.
Okay.
I went back very.
Was there any kind of gastric distress from just going back?
No, I ate very small meals. I didn't even know that was. I didn't know that you were supposed to do that. I just couldn't. Living on the powder, even though I took it several times a day, my stomach shrank. Yeah. So when I went back to eating, I was full, eating like 3 tablespoons of food.
Yeah, that's where I was going. I was curious about that. And you didn't mix this with anything. You didn't blend it with fruits or anything. You just
it was delicious.
Yeah, that's right. That's the other thing. This was the first protein powder that actually tasted good.
It's actually very. I thought of when I used this stuff called Blast Protein years ago. Yeah. I used heavy cream and he sold a coconut extract. It tasted like ice cream. I didn't want to do that with the MetRx because when I did it with the Blast Protein, it worked very well for skinny guys, but I'm not naturally a skinny guy. When I started drinking huge amounts of heavy cream, I got so fucking fat that I went on a 0-carb diet for 4 months to get. So I thought about adding cream to the MetRx. I decided not to. I just straight. But like I say, I've never to this day experienced anything that knocked out my appetite that well. Although the ketogenic diet does come close. When I go, I haven't been on it in a long time, but when I cut out carbohydrates completely, after I do notice my appetite goes, I have literally get to the point where I have to force myself to eat after a couple of weeks. And the thing is, they talk about, some of these anti-low carb people, they say, oh, the reason you lose weight on low carbs is because you wind up eating fewer calories. Well, in a way, that's true, because my appetite on the ketogenic diets dropped so low that towards the end, I was probably eating 1,100 calories a day. Of course, I was going to lose
fat. Left out is you actually have the ability to subsist on lower calories.
That's the key. That's what I write in Applied Metabolics in my article.
The whole time, because your appetite, your satiety is taken care of.
Exactly. I write that every time I talk about low carb diets in Applied Metabolics, I mentioned that the reason why low carb diets work for me, it was that it was the first diet that I could stay on long enough to lose the fat that I wanted. All the other diets, I was starving. I binge. Like the low fat, high carb was a disaster for me. Yeah. Absolute disaster. It didn't work. I tried to count, eat balance, count calories. Same thing. They said eat more meal, didn't work. I wound up binging and eating ice cream. It didn't work. When
I need a good amount of dietary fat to feel satiated. Yeah. And I'm on a plant-based diet, a vegan diet, so I eat a lot of nuts and seeds, and I find that stuff just
fat is
appetite for a long period of time.
I've always found fat. They say that protein's the most satiating. To me, it's always been fat. Yeah, anything high in fat, I mean, I don't eat it, but like, for example, I remember Paul Dillette and I, after a contest, we were driving home and we pulled into a Kentucky Fried Chicken place. This is when it was really Kentucky Fried, and we both bought the giant family-sized buckets. I mean,
Oh
that
yeah.
stuff was so greasy that if it spilled on the floor, you could ice skate on it. You know what I mean? But I got to tell you, man, that after eating that, I didn't eat for like a day. I was all that fat that very unhealthy.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
ton of fat.
Oh, today I wouldn't even look at that stuff. I mean, this is years ago. Still, you know.
There was one doctor, I forget, maybe it wasn't a doctor. It might have been in that book, The End of Overeating. I don't know if you ever read that book, but maybe it wasn't in that book. But what this guy would do is he would take a tablespoon of olive oil in between meals,
Yeah.
and that would just keep him sustained to get to the next meal.
Well, you know what? There's a scientific basis for that. And I'll tell you what it is. One of the reasons why fat is so satiating is it stimulates when you eat fat, for the body to digest the fat, you have to have a release of bile. Bile is stored, it's made in the liver, it's stored in the gallbladder. When you eat fat, the bile is released and it emulsifies fat. It takes the large fat globules and it turns it into a smaller surface area, which allows what they call the what is it called? The lipo something the fat digesting enzymes. It allows them to digest the fat.
Yeah.
But now you say, well, what does it have to do with satiety? The thing that stimulates the release of bile when you eat fat is a substance called cholecystokinin, called CCK. And CCK is a tremendous appetite suppressant. In fact, they've shown in studies the amino acid phenylalanine actually independently stimulates CCK even without fat. And there was a technique years ago where they were telling people, if you're trying to lose weight, take some phenylalanine between meals. It'll stimulate a CCK release and it'll lower your appetite, right? This was, I don't know how well it worked to tell you, but I remember there is some truth. The phenylalanine does stimulate CCK, but that's the reason why eating dietary fat, knocks out your appetite. It's the CCK that it causes to release.
Okay.
CCK is very potent. If you could isolate it, I'm not sure if you could give it in oral form. I really don't know, but if you could, I think that knowing what CCK does, I think it'd be as effective as the GLP-1 agonists,
The Ozempic
that everyone's raving about. Because the key to those GLP-1 agonist drugs is the appetite suppression.
Right.
They don't burn fat. The reason why people lose weight is it makes them feel full because it slows down intestinal motility. It slows down the movement of food through intestine, and it makes you feel full, so they don't eat as much. That's the weight loss effect. That's why when you get off the drug, and several studies have shown this, when you get off GLP-1 agonists, 99 out of 100 times the weight comes back like a freaking avalanche. I mean, these people gain most of their weight back in like 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So that's
wouldn't consuming high fiber foods have a similar effect just because of that?
Yeah.
That slower release.
Yes, high fiber foods definitely, especially with carbohydrates.
Yeah.
If you take, there's a trick. If you take, let's say, a high glycemic index carbohydrate, like a refined carbohydrate, and I don't recommend people eat that kind of stuff, but that hits you hard. When you take that, your insulin comes right out, and there's a great chance of gaining body fat, etc. But now, if you take some fiber with it, whether it's a natural fiber like vegetables, or if you prefer to take a fiber supplement like psyllium, if you take like a tablespoon with the refined carbohydrate, the fiber will kind of tremendously lower the glycemic index of the refined sugar, so you don't get a huge insulin release. Right. It's a little trick that really works, and there's another thing that does that is, and you probably know this, is apple cider vinegar.
Oh yeah.
Apple cider vinegar has a while ago I started going back. My meal after I work out is skinless chicken. It's the only animal protein I still eat. Skinless chicken, small breast. I've cut out red meat and all that stuff, and I eat it with rice. Now the chicken's okay, but the problem is the rice is way too many carbs for me because I'm very sensitive to carbs. And I noticed when I check my blood glucose the next day, every time I eat the rice, I have my blood glucose is above normal. It's not into diabetic levels, but it's what they call the insulin insensitive levels, like around 115. So then I got the idea. I did this a long time ago, but I used to take apple cider vinegar either right before or during a meal to slow down the absorption of carb. It works especially well with starch carbohydrates, right? Like rice, right? Now, the reason I stopped using apple cider vinegar, when you take, it's acetic acid, it's a caustic acid. In fact, it can rot your teeth, believe it or not. That's caustic. When you take apple cider vinegar, you got to take it with fluid, liquid. You mix it about 2 tablespoons in with fluid. It dilutes it, and you drink it down. One day I was in a hurry, so I didn't take the apple cider vinegar with fluid. I just put 2 tablespoons in a medicine cup and downed it. Something happened, Mike. It did something where it felt like I couldn't breathe. It had, you know, that thing where people get a steak stuck in their esophagus with the Heimlich maneuver. I was going, I was going like that. And I was by myself. I just fucking killed myself. I'm dead. I'm dead. You know, I couldn't get any air in. It was so caustic that taking it straight, it caused my tissues to get, you know, the esophagus, whatever its tissues, they immediately got inflamed and swelled.
Wow.
Certain allergic reactions could do that.
Yeah.
But it swelled and it knocked out my breathing. Luckily for me, it opened up about a minute later. You know, I thought I was going to die. I really did. After that, I took the bottle of Epicin and threw it away. But it was my fault because I did dilute it. So I recently went back to now when I have my rice, I take the apples, 2 tablespoons. I'm very careful to mix it with the liquid. I take it, and sure enough, the next day when I check my glucose, it's normal.
Yeah.
The apple cider vinegar really works.
One of my favorite things for improving insulin sensitivity. I would say apple cider vinegar and berberine are my 2 favorite go-tos for that. Yeah, berberine, in my experience, works just as well as metformin.
It does the same thing.
Yeah.
Basically, it increases AMPK. This, you know, that's the stuff that basically.
My fasting glucose is always perfect when I take it. My fasting glucose was as low as 76, taking berberine. And apple cider vinegar, it keeps it around 85 and below. So it's also very good. Yeah. So it's both I found to be very effective. Berberine I found to be more effective at 500 milligrams 3 times a day. That's a pretty good dosage. I think apple cider vinegar, I was taking 1 tablespoon in a glass of water before a couple meals a day, 2 or 3 meals. Both are effective though.
Yeah, apple cider vinegar, they say it works best with starch, you know, carbohydrates like potatoes.
Yeah, that's what I was taking it with actually. Yeah.
But the berberine, like you say, it works exactly like metformin, stimulates system called AMPK. And the apple cider vinegar, this is an interesting factoid about apple cider vinegar. Not only does it kind of it kind of inhibits the starch digesting enzymes, and that's the reason why you get less of a blood glucose increase when you take it with a starch. But it also inhibits the fat synthesizing enzymes. And actually, I mean, years ago they had this fad diet called the apple cider vinegar diet.
Yeah, right.
Right. I mean, it was a fad diet, you know, but I mean, I don't think it really did much. But there is a kernel of truth because apple cider vinegar, and I'm not saying people should drink like half a bottle of apple cider vinegar. That's dangerous. I wouldn't recommend that at all. You're supposed to have like 1 or 2 tablespoons. That's it, like you did. But I'm saying is that it actually will help. Let's say you're on a diet, it will help with the weight loss a little bit because if you take it with the meals, especially like starchy carbohydrates, it will also not only like prevent the glucose or you know, the huge glucose rise that will result from that, but it also will inhibit fat synthesizing enzymes to a certain degree, which will help your body lose fat. So it's good for that. There is, you know, in other words, some of these so-called these old wives' tales, as they call them.
Right.
A lot of times there's some truth to that, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Like, there's another one. It just came to, I can't remember which one it was. Oh, it was something about the remember the grapefruit diet? Did you ever hear about it?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out there's certain things in grapefruit that also aid, weight loss in certain ways. I mean, the grapefruit diet was a fad diet, just like the apple cider, but in other words, it's not completely false.
Right.
There's a little bit of truth to it. And the people that devised these things were devised so long ago, like the grapefruit, nobody knew about this. They just probably, some of these people maybe ate a lot of grapefruit and maybe reduced their food intake a little bit, noticed they had weight loss, so they attributed it to the grapefruit, and that's how the grapefruit diet began. I'm just guessing that's how it happened.
Most likely, that sounds about right.
Yeah, because they couldn't have known these factors that exist in grapefruit. They didn't isolate it until many years later.
Right. Moving on with health, what are your favorite go-to supplements when it comes to getting blood pressure into the optimal range?
Well, that's a great question. There's quite a few that are surprisingly effective. First, the first thing I would look at is magnesium. Number one, magnesium has a tremendous it actually relaxes blood vessels. It activates 300 different enzymes. People say this is in 200 million videos. On magnesium, they always start by saying, magnesium activates 300. I feel redundant just saying that, But anyway, in terms of blood pressure, it really does a number of things. It actually relaxes the blood vessels. So that's the first thing. And you have to realize that a lot of people are walking around, they don't even get the minimal daily suggested requirement of 400 milligrams, I believe it is for men. They don't even get that much, because if you look at the foods that naturally contain magnesium, leafy vegetables, nuts, basically plant foods.
Right.
If you're not, like, you're a vegan, you don't have to worry about this stuff.
Yeah.
But other people who like these carnivore diets, they're not getting any magnesium at all.
Right.
And the thing is, if they have any genetic tendencies towards blood pressure or hypertension, they're going to be in trouble, because you need magnesium to help control it. And the best form of magnesium, there's all kinds of different forms. The most absorbable, in my opinion, is one called magnesium glycinate. There's another one called magnesium citrate, which is also very absorbable. But the problem is that kind of makes you go to the bathroom. In fact, magnesium citrate is included usually before they tell you to take it, to drink several bottles before you have a colonoscopy. Because you understand that it really clears you out.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful of the citrate, but the magnesium glycinate is a good form. I use glycinate, and I use another form I only take once a day at night before I go to sleep. Magnesium is great for helping you sleep too. I use what's called magnesium threonate. I take it only at night because it's the only one that can actually, of all the magnesiums, it gets into the brain in a greater amount. Only about 15% of it gets through the blood-brain barrier. But you have to understand, most other forms of magnesium, with the exception of magnesium taurate, which is magnesium with taurine, hardly get into the brain at all. And in the brain, magnesium, again, tremendous effects. It increases the synaptic density, which makes your neurons work better. And there's some studies that suggest, they don't have solid evidence, that it might actually help prevent dementia, which is something that concerns me. So first thing is definitely magnesium. Then I would look at things that increase nitric oxide.
Oh, sorry, real quick. You said you take threonate and glycinate at night.
Different times.
Okay.
I only take the threonate. I take 3 capsules. That's the suggested doses at night as a sleep aid, but also I take it for my brain. The other times I take magnesium glycinate, I take it twice a day. I take 200 milligrams of elemental magnesium glycinate in a powder form. I take it twice a day. That's 400. That gives me my entire magnesium intake right there. But I also get magnesium in some of my other supplements. I estimate I'm probably taking about 900 to up to 1,000 milligrams of magnesium a day. But remember, I lose magnesium too, because you lose it when you work out, you lose it when you're under stress, you lose it when you don't get enough sleep. So, it's good to have a little extra magnesium.
Definitely.
So the next thing I would look at are there's a couple of omega-3 fatty acids also seem to have a great effect on blood pressure because of their effect on producing what they call neutral prostaglandins. These are substances that are fat-like substances that are involved in innumerable body functions, but some of them, unfortunately, seem to play a role in hypertension and blood pressure. They can increase the blood pressure. taking in omega-3 fatty acids will help to neutralize let's say the type of prostaglandins that can raise your blood pressure.
Right.
So you want to have at least, I would say at least 2 grams a day of omega-3 fatty acids. If you don't, you have 2 options. You can either take it in the form of a fish oil supplement. I prefer the liquid. I don't like to take fish oil capsules because you have to take too many of them.
Yeah.
You have to take 10 or 20 of them to get the right. It's not. I don't like 20 capsules of fish oil.
Right.
I take liquid. It comes out to be a tablespoon equals it.
Yeah.
So I take the liquid fish oil. That's your first option. Your second option is to eat actual fatty fish. Now that's mackerel, halibut, what is it? Salmon, of course. And there's several of them. It has to be fatty fish. And here's an important point: you have to eat the fatty fish meal 3 times a week. Twice a week is not enough to bring up what they call the omega-3 index. This is a formula where they can kind of figure out how much. It's a measurement of omega-3 in red blood cells, but it tells you how much omega-3 you have in your body. It should be over 6. To get that amount requires 3 fatty fish meals a week, not 2, 3. And of course, if you don't like fish like me, I don't like fish. I burned out on tuna fish. I ate it for 30 years every day. I can't even look at tuna fish. Anyway, but so your option is to take the fish oil, which I do. So those are your options. And then, of course, a very important, really useful way, this is a tremendous effect, is to emphasize things that will increase your nitric oxide synthesis. Now, nitric oxide, of course, is a gas. It's produced in the endothelium, the lining of blood vessels. It's very ephemeral. For years, scientists knew that there was something that's produced in the lining of blood vessels that dilated the blood vessel immediately, but they couldn't isolate it because it disappeared in like 3 seconds. So they called it the endothelial relaxation factor because the lining of your blood vessels is a smooth muscle. And when it tightens, that's high blood pressure. In fact, for years, they have an expression called essential hypertension, meaning it's hypertension means high blood pressure. Essential means basically it's they don't really know the cause. A lot of people have high blood pressure, but they don't know the exact cause. Now they're starting to think that damage to the endothelium in a lot of people, which can actually be caused by high blood pressure itself, causes a problem where they don't release or don't produce enough nitric oxide. So it's a vicious cycle. The high blood pressure damages the endothelium. There's less nitric oxide. There's even more high blood pressure. So you can get around that by eating foods or taking supplements that will increase your nitric oxide synthesis. Now, the immediate precursor for nitric oxide is the amino acid arginine. Now, the problem with arginine is about 40% of it is destroyed when you take it orally. It's broken down in the gut because of this enzyme called arginase. So arginine is not the greatest. It will work in a lot of instances, but it's not super dependable. An alternative to arginine that will do the same thing as arginine, but much more effectively, is an amino acid that found naturally in watermelon called citrulline. Now, citrulline, when you take it orally, travels to the kidneys. In the kidneys, enzymes turn it back into arginine. See, citrulline can be, arginine can turn into citrulline, and citrulline can turn out, it's like a two-way street. And when you take oral citrulline in the kidneys, it's converted back into arginine, and it bypasses the arginase barrier, goes into the blood. As soon as that arginine gets into the blood and encounters the nitric oxide synthesis enzymes, there's your nitric oxide right there. It works great. So citrulline is an option. Of course, then you have the nitrate vegetables, spinach, beets. This is a great way to get natural. What happens there is they contain nitrates. As soon as you start to eat them, there's enzymes in the saliva that start the initial conversion of nitrate into nitrite. Then you swallow it, right? And then further, the nitrate enzymes in the gut convert that into nitric oxide. See, so but the process takes a little more time. Here you're talking about 2.5, 3 hours. So it takes, so in other words, if you were to use something that's high in natural nitrate, for example, beetroot, a lot of people like beetroot juice or beetroot powder supplements. Now that's fine, but you got to give them about 2.5 to 3 hours for these enzymatic changes to occur. And the other thing you have to be cognizant of is don't use a antibiotic mouthwash, because the antibiotic mouthwash in proximity to eating these vegetables or taking beetroot, because the antibiotic mouthwash will knock out these enzymes that start the initial conversion of nitrate into nitrite. Now, you could tell the antiseptic mouthwashes. You'll see it says that, but strangely enough, Listerine, which is one of the more popular mouthwashes, apparently doesn't kill off the nitric oxide producing bacteria. So if you still want to use mouthwash, you can use Listerine, but just for the safety side, just to guarantee that you get the effect, I would suggest keeping the mouthwash away from when you're eating these vegetables or taking a beetroot, just to guarantee that you'll get the maximum nitric oxide production. So, and there's a couple of others. I'd have to think about that, but those are really. Calcium also has a blood pressure lowering effect. Right. Vitamin C to a certain extent. And I'm trying to remember some of the others, but those are the main ones. Those alone. And the great thing about the nitric oxide stuff is it'll bypass. Let's say somebody has a damaged endothelium, where because they're not producing enough nitric oxide, they have hypertension. If you take this stuff, it'll bypass that and allow your body to still produce the nitric oxide. So it'll. I mean, they've shown in studies, people that eat beets or take these nitrate vegetables or take a beetroot powder supplement, they actually show substantial decreases comparable to taking blood pressure lowering drugs. Right. Now, the problem with the antihypertensive drugs is they have a lot of side effects.
Yeah.
Like there's a favorite story I have where one of the side effects of antihypertensive drugs is that 10% of men who use them get erectile dysfunction, right? And the thing is, when doctors give out, these drugs to men, if the men ask about the side effects, they never mention the erectile dysfunction, because what they found, there's something called, remember I mentioned earlier, placebo effect? The flip side of a placebo effect is the nocebo effect,
right?
Where if a doctor says to a patient, "Oh, I'm giving you this antihypertensive drug," one of the side effects is that 10% of men, not many, only 10% of men, they get erectile dysfunction. Right. Well, guess what? 90% of the men that are told that are going to get erectile dysfunction. Yeah. That's the funny thing about it.
Now I'm psychosomatic, even if the drug is not actually causing it. Exactly. Now you have psychosomatic erectile dysfunction because you're thinking, hope it doesn't cause that side effect for me. And now you have that worrisome thought in your mind.
And the funny thing is that nitric oxide, as you probably know, plays a huge role in erectile function, because Viagra, all these phosphodiesterase drugs, they work by helping to increase the localized production of nitric oxide in the spongy erectile tissues of the people. That's how they work. Yeah. So in other words, but this kind of reminds me of another drug, just a little tangentially here. There's a drug called Finasteride, sold as Proscar and also as Propecia.
Yep.
When it was sold as Proscar, it was used to treat benign prostatic enlargement. Then they found that it blocked dihydrotestosterone, which is the instigator of male pattern baldness. So they remarketed it as a drug called Propecia at 1/5 the dosage, 1 milligram. And a couple of years ago, they started coming out with these stories all online, where finasteride was causing tremendous erectile dysfunction, and it was permanent effect, and this and that. Well, the truth is, every study, I looked into this. In fact, I think I wrote an article in Applied Metabolics about it. Every study I looked into, and they looked at it comprehensively, it showed only about something like 6% of men showed erectile dysfunction from finasteride. And then I realized what it is that, and then I noticed that the studies that showed this problem, they called it the finasteride syndrome or something like that.
Yeah.
Studies that showed this were always written by the same researchers. One was a guy named Abraham Trash or something like that. It was always the same researchers. And then they had these groups that kind of like, it was like that tribal thing that we were talking about earlier. They all agreed that, in other words, it was a psychosomatic effect.
Right.
To say that finasteride causes impotence by affecting what they call neurosteroids in the brain, right? Some of them are produced of DHT. Unfortunately for them, there's different forms of DHT, and the form of DHT that finasteride inhibits is not made in the brain. So that was completely false. But they still say that.
Yeah.
It's almost like what we were talking about, the political thing, where people say things that they know are false, but they say them anyway.
Right.
So in other words, but if you put the suggestion in somebody's head that, well, you take the finasteride, you can expect to have erectile dysfunction.
Yeah, that's often discussed as a high probability with finasteride. I mean, 6% is really low. But when you hear people talk about finasteride, it almost sounds that there's more than a 50-50 chance that you're going to develop those sexual issues.
That's the funny thing. It's false.
Yeah, it's just people talking in the echo chamber.
Exactly right. They've got this it's like almost like an anti-finasteride society going. They got all these groups and forums where these guys swear that it messed them up for life. It's all bullshit, And here's the interesting part: a lot of these guys who claim that finasteride gave them impotence, for example, if you check, a lot of these guys are actually deficient in testosterone.
Right.
Testosterone is needed for erectile function.
Yeah.
And if you're deficient in testosterone, that's one of the reasons why guys who get on testosterone therapy get happy, because suddenly their penis starts to work again.
Right.
So a lot of these guys who get on finasteride, they're already low on testosterone. So, they somehow blame it on the finasteride, when in fact it's their low testosterone, not the finasteride, that's causing the problem. I'm not saying that happens all the time, but it happens in a surprising number of cases.
I wonder how severe it is in the 6% group, because I've had people contact me who took that, who said that their sex drive was ruined for years after they stopped taking it.
I'll tell you, if they say that it's a nocebo effect, they're talking into themselves. Yeah. Because you have to understand, this is another major misconception about DHT. I still see, I just saw one recently where a doctor was talking about how important DHT is for male sexual function. In other words, the people that are anti-finasteride say that DHT is absolutely vital for getting an erection. Wrong. DHT has no effect. DHT is needed for the development of male sexual organs in babies. If you don't have enough DHT, the male sexual, at that time, in infancy, whatever, you don't get the normal male genitalia development. But after that, DHT doesn't do much.
Right.
It's not involved. It's not involved in sexual function. It does not have any effect on libido or stimulating sex drive. All of that is testosterone. Testosterone is the libido hormone in both men and women. Testosterone increase. In fact, some men that get on, it's kind of funny, a lot of guys get on testosterone and increases their sex drive so much that it becomes uncomfortable. And one guy in the gym told me he got on testosterone replacement therapy. He says, Jerry, I want to fuck every chick I see now. It's driving me nuts.
Yeah.
I said, well, were you like that before? He says, no. I said, well, the testosterone is normalizing your libido. That's what's going on. Look at it as a plus. Just control yourself. Go watch some porn. But it's all just a lot of falsehoods that, what's that saying? I think Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, he made this famous statement. He says, if you tell a lie often enough, eventually it will be believed. Now, this is a credo adopted by a lot of I will say, unnamed politicians today
Oh yeah, sure.
all the time. They repeat the same lies over and over again. And a lot of people, because they hear it so often, they believe it's true, but it isn't. And that's
Yeah,
the way it is with stuff like finasteride. In other words, if enough people say it did this, it did that, it cost me my sex drive, other people will believe it. And,
right.
and you believe it, if you think that finasteride, just like with the hypertension pills, if you think finasteride is going to cause, sex impotence or loss, it will,
Yeah,
because you did it to yourself. It's a nocebo effect. The nocebo effect, Mike, is just as potent as the placebo effect.
yeah,
If you really believe something's going to be harmful, 9 times out of 10, it really will.
yeah.
Yep.
And if you have psychosomatic erectile dysfunction a couple times, now it's in your mind. So you
Exactly.
keep reinforcing it. So if you're like, uh-oh, I don't know if it's going to work tonight type attitude, you're creating that every single time now. It just
Right.
gets getting reinforced.
Right. Well, it's like Arnold. He came out with this kind of self-help book, and I could put the theme of the book in one sentence. If you believe something's going to happen, it will. It's kind of, you hear this all with a lot of pop psychology. But if you visualize something, but there's a certain amount of truth to that, because if you visualize, let's say you're in the gym, and you visualize yourself making gains, you,
Right.
like, again, subconsciously do things like maybe push a couple of extra reps, train a little bit harder, cut the rest time, which will translate into actual gains. Now, on the flip side, if you go to the gym and say, I'm just a slow gainer, no matter what I do, I just can't make any gains. Well, you're going to train like that. You say it's useless anyway, and you're just going to go through the motions and you won't make any gains. But
Yeah.
it's you that's doing it. See?
Now, belief is everything with training.
Yes.
If you go into any lift and you don't believe that you're going to be able to achieve whatever it is you're trying to do, let's say I want to do 8 reps on this set. If you're going in with a bunch of doubt, going, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this, the other sets felt kind of heavy, there's no way you're going to achieve it.
Right. That's a fact.
But if you have a strong, you're not always going to achieve it, even when you believe you are. But
Sure.
you're way more likely to.
Yeah.
You're definitely not going to achieve it when you don't believe you are. That's for sure.
I mean, look at the lottery. People play the lottery. What was it? The Powerball lottery has, I think it's 292 million to 1 odds. And
Right.
every time somebody buys one of those, when the lottery goes up to $1 billion or 800 million, you look at the faces of people waiting. Because I have to admit, I've sometimes bought a ticket myself. And when I wait online, because there's always a line to buy the tickets when the lottery gets that high, you look at the faces of the people. You could just hear what they're thinking. They're already counting the ways they're going to spend that money. They're
Right.
totally convinced that I'm going to get the winning ticket. I'm going to get that 800 million prize. Of course, it never happens. Statisticians say that you can play the lottery. Get this is a shocking statistic. You can play the lottery for 2,500 years and never win the top prize. And I'm talking play the lottery consistently, like
Yeah.
every day, and still not win. 2,500 years. But it's the Vegas thing. You live right there. I mean, when somebody wins a slot machine, I haven't been there, but I remember bells used to go off and lights would go off. And, the other people playing the slots who are sticking their quarters in the machine, they're ready to quit because they haven't won in 2
Right.
hours.
Right.
They see that bell on the light. Oh, somebody won. And they keep playing. That's the whole psychology behind the lottery. They see that somebody wins, so why can't it be me? Well, it's not going to be you. The odds are you can get hit by lightning 10 times in a row before walking down the street on a sunny day before you win the Powerball lottery.
Yeah, casinos are really depressing when you see just thousands of people just sitting there like drones in front of slot machines, now they have these cards you can put in where I guess it just runs off your credit card or your ATM. So you just keep pushing the button. You don't actually have to physically put currency in it. That's an option. So I see people with there's a chain connected to a card and the card is in the slot machine and they're just playing endlessly.
Oh,
Until the card runs out of money, I guess.
well,
If it's a credit card, then it never runs out, right? I don't know. So I don't know if it's an ATM.
That's scary. Oh man, that's scary.
It's really scary.
how much money people could lose.
It's always the people that are gambling who are the ones who are the last people that should be. They're the ones who can't afford to gamble. People that are just throwing away money.
Yeah.
It's not the super, I mean, obviously super wealthy people go and blow money too, but that's not the vast majority of people in a casino. The vast majority of people are people that are taking their paychecks, cashing it at the casino, losing it probably nights or within hours of cashing it.
Yep. Well, that's what they've shown in research on the lottery. The people who buy the most lottery tickets are the poorest people.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was bringing it up to that.
No, I understand why. I'm not trying to put them down. They're poor and they're dreaming of getting out of their poverty. But on the other hand, they can't afford to do that.
Right.
That's the sad part, you know?
Yeah, the sad part is, I think, as well, is that in their mind, there's no chance but this for them.
Yeah.
They look at their options, and whether this is true or not, I can't say. It's based on every individual situation, but in their mind, and that's the part that matters, your mind. Because I mean, if you don't believe that you're capable of achieving wealth through quote unquote legitimate means, then why not roll the dice?
Right.
On the, what do you have to lose if you feel that, hey, I'm going to be stuck here anyway, so this is my only chance out of this?
Yeah, and it's still sad though, because that money they need for really realistic things like paying their rent and food and stuff for their children. It's a shame that they throw it away on that lottery,
Yes.
And the funny thing is, the really wealthy people, from what I understand, they almost never play the lottery. They're not even they don't bother with it. For, again, obvious reasons. They already got the money. What do they need that for? Why waste it? They won't even spend $5 on it. It's kind of
Yeah, we can't even buy lottery tickets in Nevada. We have to go, at least not in this area. We have to go to California. I don't think they're even legal for sale in the entire state of Nevada. So people go to Arizona or California because there's border states that are close by, or border towns rather, that are close by, just to get lottery tickets.
I didn't know that.
Pulled together.
I wonder why they have that there. I wonder why.
Probably because gambling is legal here.
That's right. Yeah, the gambling.
Yeah, it's like we have enough vices here. You don't blow your money, you got to go blow your money at the casino. You don't get to go to 7-Eleven and buy a lotto ticket.
Or maybe the lottery might pull away some of the gamblers. Yeah, it's kind of competition.
I think this unhealthy mindset, though, is prominent in so many areas now, like social media, with the abundance of just so much information constantly being coming at you. I think it creates a state of anxiety and also a state of hopelessness.
Right.
And how people, instead of being productive in the real world, you spend more time creating more anxiety, just scrolling and liking and viewing, because these mechanisms are made with the same mechanisms that are utilized with slot machines. That's why it's so addictive. None of this stuff is addictive by accident. It's all addictive by design.
Right. Well, I see people in the gym. I think we've talked about this. Yeah. I mean, they bring their cell phones in the gym and they just won't. They won't put it down.
Right.
I mean, I've seen people, quite a few. They'll be doing an exercise and looking at their cell phones while they're doing the exercise. I mean, it's like they're completely. I mean,
that's really bad.
And it's not like they're doing something important. They're doing stuff like Instagram and Facebook.
Never something important. Yeah.
It's just garbage. I mean, they can do that anywhere. To do in the gym is ridiculous.
I was walking my dogs the other day, and there was a lady walking, and she had her phone like this, and she had the leash. She had the leash in her other hand, and she was just walking down the street looking at her phone. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, if you can't even put your phone down for a walk around the block, what are you doing at home? Obviously, you're just looking at, I mean, you're glued to your phone when you're going for a walk, so you're definitely going to be glued to your phone when you're sitting at home. There's another guy I know, forget about a phone, he has an iPad, and he goes walking around the neighborhood, not inside the neighborhood, the gated neighborhood, outside of it, where you're on fairly major streets. At night, this guy's walking with an iPad, completely, just from a safety protocol. That's a bad thing to do. But also, there's so many benefits to walking beyond just the exercise, right? Like I love walking. I get 2-hour walks in with my dogs every day. Sometimes after I do a really hard workout, I'm like, oh man, I got to walk the dogs now. Once I'm out there walking with them though, it feels great. Sometimes I'll say to myself, okay, I worked out hard. We'll do a shorter walk today. It never ends up being a shorter walk because once I'm out there, it just feels good. It feels good to be outside, feels good to be in as close to a natural environment as I'm going to get. There's no major roads coming through here. There's no commerce. I don't see Starbucks or any kind of commercial realty when I'm walking around the area. So there's a lot of positives to it, but just getting into just the physical activity is very beneficial. But I always found it to be a very potent form of meditation as well.
Yeah,
now, you're not going to get that though if you're just looking at your phone the entire time or you're checking it constantly. Go for a 2-hour walk and not look at your phone once. Can you do that? Now, if you can't do that, that brings up a larger issue. So you can't even go for a walk without looking at your phone. But even if you're just checking it, that's better than looking at it the entire time. But that's how low the bar is right now. There are people that actually have camps where they teach people how to detach from devices. So look, hey, we're going to go into the woods, no cell phones allowed. We're going to spend a week out there and we're going to figure out what you want to do with your life. Because I think people are so distracted by constantly being inundated with information, you don't really have any time to think. This one book I read said that one of the most nefarious things about smartphones is that you're never bored anymore. And he framed that as a negative. He goes, it's good to be bored from time to time because that's where you actually have a chance to think. So you're in line at the grocery store. Now you just look at your phone the whole time while you're waiting. Before you just had to stand there and think and look around, and maybe you grabbed a magazine off the stand if there's one close by, but you actually had to be alone with your thoughts.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many people are even alone with their thoughts anymore, because distraction is right there, accessible in your pocket. And stuff. When I was growing up, it was always, hey, TV is bad. TV is going to rot your brain. TV would be a step in the right direction compared to social media, because if you're watching a 1-hour episode of something, you actually have to pay attention, right?
That's right. That's right. No, like the cell phones have been definitely a curse and a benefit at the same time.
Yeah, there's some benefits too. I don't want to make it sound like it's just all negative.
Yeah, I mean, you look at something like online dating, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got good points and bad points. The good points is that I find I'm not trying to pick up women. I'm in a relationship and all that, but
yeah,
my impression is that women are much single women, especially younger. They're a lot more defensive these days than when I was a kid. You know what I mean? They're on guard. They're suspicious of guys. And it's very hard for a young guy to approach a woman without her getting overly defensive. Whereas if you go on an online dating app, the women are basically saying that they're open to a relationship. It kind of makes it a little bit easier,
That's a good point, actually, that I didn't think of, because I always said that when I come from the generation, if you wanted to meet a woman, you had to go talk to her in the real world. Right. And that seems like to be a skill that is dying. But at the same time, I didn't think of the point that you brought up now, where it's if women are more defensive and you're more likely to feel that you've fallen into a Me Too type situation, it's not worth the hassle. It's like, look, I don't want to go say, hey, she looks great, because there may be some blowback on that I don't want to deal with.
Yeah.
No, if you lie, she's saying she's looking for a relationship.
Yeah, no, but I'm not criticizing. I think they should be defensive because there's a lot of crazy guys out there,
Sure, no doubt.
But on the other hand, there's a lot of good guys that would probably be, open to a good relationship. And the app, now when you use the app, I haven't used any of them, but from what I understand, it's just an initial opening door. In other words, you converse a little bit, see if you have some interest together. If the person seems likable, then you meet in person. So it's not strictly like a digital phone thing. You know what I mean? You still have to meet the person. You can't date on the phone. You know what I mean? You got to meet. Now that's the good part. The bad part, in my opinion, of online dating is a lot of people misrepresent themselves.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Tremendous amount of that. I know a friend of mine. This guy he won a couple of titles. He moved to New York, but this guy used to like about 20 of these online dating things. And I remember talking to him outside the gym. And I said, "What's your impression?" He said, "You won't believe the way these people lie." I talk about the women. He says, "Yeah." He said, "I conversed with a woman. I met her on a dating app." He says, "When I met her, I didn't even recognize her." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "The photo she used on the dating app was taken 30 years ago." And then you have men who will actually use pictures that are not even them.
Right,
They'll
right.
use pictures of guys that like maybe Brad Pitt or something like that. You know? And then when the woman meets him, of course, she says, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know. And so there's a lot of and then in the text when you describe yourself, there's always exaggerations and lies too.
yeah,
So I mean,
yeah.
because when you meet the person, then as you converse with them, this is what the guy told me. You find out that a lot of what they said they liked was only to attract men they think would like the same thing. When
Right.
they had no interest, because when the guy tried to talk to him, they brushed him off. I don't know anything about it was all bullshit.
Yeah,
That's the bad thing. But in today's the way things are today, I think that's one of the I can't really negate the so-called online dating. I think it's good for a lot of people. Like
yeah,
like if I were not in a relationship now, I'm older guy, but still, let's say I was a couple of years younger, not in a relationship. I can't. I wouldn't go to. I hate fucking bars and that kind of stuff.
right.
I'm the kind of guy. I have to have more like maybe somebody introduce me to something like that. I'm not like a cold person where I go up to women and start talking. That's never been my person. Once I
Right.
start talking, I'm fine. I'm not shy or anything.
Yeah,
But I like the fact that, this gives you kind of a head start where you know that this woman's receptive to you at least.
right.
It might not go anywhere, but at least it's receptive. You know what I mean?
And then you get a chance to have some interactions before you ever meet in person.
Right.
Maybe
That's
get
what
an
I'm saying.
idea if you're on the same page on a couple things. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't know for sure until you meet in person, but at least you can get some idea.
Yeah. I mean, I've run across a couple of people that actually got married through
Oh
people
yeah,
that,
I know some people. Yeah,
I mean, so, apparently it works for some people, I mean, but like you were saying earlier, the people with their constant heads, phones of that is not good. I mean, and the thing about, I have a pet peeve. I mentioned this several times about this stuff about bringing the cell phones in the gym. I detest that stuff. I hate that because I mean, I go to Gold's Gym. I get there like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. It's not crowded, but I'm telling you, Mike, it's, I would say 99%, 99.1% of the people in the gym are walking around with it. They have it in their hand, in their face. It's maybe me and one or two other people that are actually training and focusing. All
right.
these people, and they sit there and they sit there 20. I did a workout, I did an entire shoulder workout about a week ago. This person was still on the same machine behind me. I did an entire shoulder, and they never did one. They were on the cell phone.
Right.
Why do they even come to the gym? I don't get it. What can I say? I will never fall into that. I don't even bring my cell phone stays in the locker with my gym bag. I don't even bring it into the gym. The only time I bring my cell phone in, and when I do aerobics in the back, I have a thing that measures my pulse on the cell phone. That's when I use the cell phone. That's it. The only time I bring it in the gym.
Use my cell phone because I listen to music through it, of course, and then I use the timer on it to keep track of time in between sets.
Yeah, but those are legitimate reasons,
Yeah,
though.
yeah. But what I don't do is
You're not looking.
I don't get on there and check my email, start answering business questions and stuff like that because because also I don't, if there's some problem, I don't want to know about it right at that moment because I'm focused on my workout. Because I remember in the past I would make a mistake if I would check my email and there would be some issue, and now it's on my mind. And I don't want to deal with that right now because I'm in the middle of the workout, and I'm going to deal with that after the workout. So if I'm going to deal with it after the workout, then I don't need to know about it while I'm working out. That 45 minutes to an hour, just let me train.
Detracting from your workout. You don't want to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't look at Facebook and Instagram when you're working out. I mean, that's nonsense. You can do that anytime.
Yeah.
Why are you doing it in the gym? Is it that
I
important?
got rid of Facebook and Twitter years ago, and I still have Instagram, which I'm on the fence with how useful it is. It
Yeah.
has some merits, but I take long breaks from it from time to time too, where I'll just delete it from my phone for a month, not even think about it, because I know several people that it's preventing them from becoming successful.
Oh,
What I mean by that is it's giving them the illusion that they're making progress when they're not. So they're posting all the time and they're not getting anything out of it, but they think that just because they're like, okay, I did something useful for my business, I made this post. Right, but did you get an increase in augmentation in your income in any way? Did you get more traffic to your website? Did any measurable marker of
Right.
moving forward present itself? And the answer is usually an emphatic no.
Right.
So and then if you do get a lot of attention, what does that even mean? Is that adding up to anything useful? So it just gives you the illusion that you're progressing when you're not. And that's really insidious, because you could be spending that time doing something more useful. Like writing an article for your website and for your newsletter subscribers, that's highly measurable, because people are paying to see that information. Subscribers want this information. That's a really good use of your time.
Right. Well, the only thing I use Instagram for is each month I put a short video describing what's in the issue. That's
the way to use it.
That's the only thing I use it for. That's it. I don't.
I mean, look, if you use it the way the mantra for drug dealers is, don't use your own supply, sell the drugs, but don't use it. Right. That's the way to use Instagram. So you use it to put your message out there, but you don't look at what anyone else is doing, or at least you minimize what other people's content that you're viewing.
Right. I think
in the context of fitness, I think the fitness industry is worse off now than it ever has been, because there's too much information.
Yeah.
Way too much training information. I mean, imagine someone getting into training now. They go, okay, let me get some ideas. I'm going to go to Instagram. You're going to be inundated with so much nonsense, because so much of what people post is stuff they want to go viral and get views. Right. Because the basics are not exciting. If I post one of my workouts, it's not really exciting. It's me doing basic movement patterns. I'm not jumping over my car. I'm not doing handstands in my living room on 2 chairs. But that's the kind of the idiocy that you see, because people have to keep stepping up the ante.
Right. That's true. It's true. And not only that, but there's so much misinformation. These guys are all self-anointed experts.
Right.
But it's amazing though. Some of these guys have, they don't, to me, have much of a physique. They certainly don't have any knowledge, and yet they get like millions of followers.
Yeah, you talk about the guy you saw at Gold's Gym who has 3 million followers, and he doesn't even have an impressive physique.
And then they get these sponsors.
Yeah.
And now I'm sure they're exaggerating, but some of these guys are claiming to make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a month from Instagram.
It's possible. It sounds like a ton, but it's possible.
I mean, I could see celebrities. I mean,
the company's getting from that relationship. I mean, if they have millions of followers who are hanging on their words, where they say, go buy this product, it may be worth, I don't know. But also it could be them just exaggerating it to embellish their image, their avatar, if you will, even more so.
I think that some people, like certain celebrities, like I remember Kim Kardashian, she was going on Instagram, and I forget what she was advertising, but she was getting $40,000 for each post.
Wow.
So, that I would believe that.
Yeah.
Personally, I wouldn't listen to anything Kim Kardashian says, but that's just, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, what I'm trying to say is, I wouldn't buy a product. This is my thinking. Right. Just because some celebrity says it's great.
Yeah.
I don't understand that mindset. I don't, even with the bodybuilders.
Well, I never understood supplement companies that paid celebrities, or even celebrities in the context of the industry, fitness celebrities. I never understood why they would pay those people so much money to try to say that they use the product, because clearly that's not all they use. They're using anabolics and other things. So right there. And two, with a supplement, sure, you might get enough one-time hits off of it. Maybe that's the benefit. You get some famous person to endorse it because you'll get enough of one-time hits. But if you don't get any benefit from it, it doesn't matter who's endorsing it. You're not going to keep taking it. I mean, Sylvester Stallone tried to build a supplement company a while back, and he's a huge megastar, right? He had that In Stone supplement company. It bombed. It didn't do well because it wasn't enough that he was behind it. Because like I said, supplement users are not as dumb as supplement companies like to believe they are. Sure, you may be able to fool them once or twice. Okay, let me give this Turkesterone a shot. But are you going to keep buying it if you're not getting any measurable benefit after a while? No, you're going to move on to something else.
I was in the gym the other night. Somebody pointed out something to me. This guy, Chris Bumstead, who's he's like something 5 or 6 classic Mr. Olympic.
Mr. Olympias. Yep.
I met him once. He's a nice guy. And I think has a fantastic physique.
Oh yeah.
This guy has millions of followers.
Yeah.
And the guy pointed. He says, "See those cans over there? There was a whole shelf full of. It said bum on it, right? He has an entire line of something, and he keeps coming out with more and more supplements. And and I'm thinking to myself, he must be making money. He keeps coming out with this stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like what you just said, people are buying this because they're looking at his physique.
Right.
And he makes videos where he shows himself mixing his own supplements. So his followers, they probably somehow think, well, if it worked for Chris Bumstead, look at his great physique, it'll work for me. It's very rational thinking,
Yeah.
Very irrational thinking. I'm not saying Chris Bumstead's stuff is junk. I didn't even look at it, to tell you the truth.
No.
I mean, they might be good supplements, but I wouldn't never to ascribe his, let's say, results entirely to his supplements is fairly silly.
No one's going to look like him, no matter how many supplements you take or what supplements you're taking. Supplements give you a bump if you're doing everything else right.
Right.
You have your nutrition on point, your sleep's on point, your training is on point. You'll get a bump, but it's not. I don't think most supplements are going to create anything dramatic. No. Even anabolics, you have to have everything dialed in. There's plenty of people I know who take anabolics that they don't look anything remotely impressive. Right. They're overstating the benefits or overestimating the benefits of anabolics. They're thinking I can just eat whatever I want and train any way I want, and I'll just take anabolics. And they look sloppy. They don't look like professional bodybuilders or high-level athletes.
Well, I've written in Applied Metabolics. I pointed out how, I kind of worked out and watched Arnold train in his heyday as a bodybuilder. I've seen him go through about 15 different training partners. And Arnold was generous with his steroid information and his diet information. And these guys trained him, did same exercises, same sets, even the same weight. And what I wrote was not one of them even remotely looked like Arnold. Maybe not even remotely. I mean, everybody has a different muscle shape. But I'm telling you, they just it didn't work for them.
Right.
So Arnold made tremendous progress doing this stuff. These guys, they could have done anything. It did not work for them. You know what I mean? It's just a huge. I made that mistake myself when I was a kid. I used to, they had a magazine that would come out each year. They'd print the training routine of Mr. America. And every time that issue came out, I would follow Mr. America's exact workout routine with the ability. I was only, 13 years old. I thought that if I followed Mr. America's workout routine, it would give me a physique like Mr. America.
Yeah, we all fell for that at some point.
I had an excuse. I was 13. I didn't know.
Yeah.
But for an adult to do that, no, now there's something wrong.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's the Wild West out there. Well, fortunately, we can end on this. Fortunately, there are places that have great information. That's why yours is my go-to, appliedmetabolics.com. And like I said, I've been a subscriber for 10 years. I check out your stuff every month. Your information's great. I always learn something new every time I check into it. And one thing I've done recently is I've avoided just getting bombarded with too much information. I have a few go-to people that I like their stuff, and I just stick with that because I think you can get on information overload sometimes where you just have too much information in your head, and now it creates this paralysis type situation, whether it's training, whether it's nutrition, whether it's supplementation or anything.
Yeah, it's funny that you're saying this because just last 2 days I've been reading research for my next issue of Applied Metabolics, and I've read through so many papers, Mike, that I'm like stymied because I don't know where to begin. I got so much information swirling in my head. It's like a busload. I keep saying, where should I stop? What should I do? I will start it, but it's so much that it bombarded myself. Because I did all in the space of 2 days. I read 300 pages of medical information that, say, what do I do now? Which part should I focus on? You know what I mean? So, I'm sure I always do. I'll come up with the idea, but right now I'm kind of like, I got to figure out where.
You do a great job of digesting information that the average person would find impossible to read, just because it's boring. Let's be honest, that medical information type stuff, it's not exciting read. It's not a kickback on the couch type reading stuff. It's very brain intensive to even go through that stuff. And then to even understand, and even to have an understanding of what you just read is not always easy. Sometimes people draw the wrong conclusions when they read these things. So you have to read it, make sure you're drawing the right conclusions, and then express it in a way that the average person can understand it and find it interesting enough to get through.
But that's what I try to do.
It's not easy to do that.
No, I mean, a lot of the stuff I read, if you saw the raw form of a lot of stuff, I mean, you would, so most people would be like Japanese to them.
Yeah.
It's the Japanese, I'm saying, I have to convert that into more or less digestible material. And I learned a long time when I first started writing, there was in the writing books that I read, they said you should write for people at a 6th grade level. Don't treat people like idiots, but write so that even if they had only got as far as the 6th grade, they would understand. So in other words, I don't treat my readers like morons, not at all. In fact, I always say, I mentioned this in my own videos, that applied metabolics is not for dumb people.
No, it's definitely not.
In other words, if you have a 10-second attention span,
right,
don't even bother subscribing, because as you know, Mike, as a subscriber, it's extremely in depth. I literally cover everything. But on the other hand, because of my experience of almost 50 years as a professional writer, I know how to kind of write so that it's palatable and understandable and most importantly, practical for some, like I said earlier, I don't want to write stuff that's interesting, but somebody say, well, what the hell good, how am I supposed to use this?
Right.
I can't apply it. What good is it? I write some of my articles, I put a little historical stuff in there sometimes, because I think that's kind of interesting, and I sometimes pepper it. I put in, thanks to my experience, I can write about things that happened in the so-called golden age of bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Training with Arnold and stuff. And, a lot of people like that stuff. So I put that in there too. In other words, it's not straight facts.
Right.
That's the problem with some of these other digital.
Like experiences with Vince Garanda, Mike Menzer. There's a lot of interesting things like that.
Right. See, that's the problem with some of these other digital publications, which I've looked at, is that they are straight facts and they tend to be very dry. And they talk about subjects that really aren't of interest to a lot of people. I mean, some people might be interested. I'm not saying I'm not saying that what they're writing is garbage or wrong. It's accurate, but it's not well written. That's what I'm trying to. They're not writers, these people.
Yeah.
So I mean, to really get this stuff across, especially today when you have so much competition and so many people where they don't want to. You know how many requests I get a month, Mike, where people say, "Do you have a what is it called? A voice edition of Applied Metabolics?"
Yeah.
They don't want to read it all. They want it read to them. So what I tell them is, I said, look, you already have one. If you have a computer, Microsoft has a free read program, which will read you the whole article. You don't have to, even if you're illiterate, you'll be able to,
Well, I think the problem also is that on two folds. One, people are addicted to information, but then they're lazy with their addiction to information. Yeah. The other thing is that people just want to know stuff, but how many people actually want to apply things? That's what I like about your information, is that most of it is very applicable almost immediately. For example, my friend Tim Larkin picked up a tip from you. He always used to get the jitters when he drank coffee. And then you had a tip saying, just take some theanine with coffee and it'll get rid of the jitters. And theanine is a very interesting compound because it doesn't make you tired or drowsy. It actually increases focus, but it also kind of has a anti-anxiety type effect as well. So when you take it with caffeine, now you get that nice caffeine high without the jitters. And he said that worked super well for him, and he started doing that immediately.
When I first started the newsletter, I guess it was, how many years ago? 12 years ago, I can't remember. But when I first started it, a friend of mine in the gym, I told him I was starting this publication. And he says, "Hey, you're making a big mistake, Jerry." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Nobody reads anymore." He says, "If I were you, I'd go into videos, just do videos, forget the writing stuff." I said, "Yeah, but YouTube videos." Now, this is at a time when if you had a lot of followers on your YouTube videos, you could make some money. Since then, you probably know they've changed the whatever logarithm.
Oh
When
yeah.
they make pennies on the video.
Yeah.
You know, so then there was no, even back then, there was no money really. I said, I'm trying to do this. This is my income.
Yeah.
Sure, I like to give out information, but I got to get, I got to pay my bills too, He says, well, nobody reads. And, and I thought about that over the years. And I keep reading books all the time, new books.
Yeah, me too.
Nobody's reading, Mike. My question to you is, why are they still publishing books?
Yeah, people are still reading. Yeah, people are still reading.
I think a certain segment of the population, it's true. They don't have the patience to read, and they are looking at videos.
There's some people that don't read one book in a year. They don't read anything. They just absorb video content.
Yeah, those people I'm sure would never subscribe.
Yeah.
Because it is like, it's like 30, 40 pages a month. It's too much for them. They won't even read a paragraph. My girlfriend said to me, she noticed I put a couple of negative comments about Trump on my Facebook page. So she said to me, you got to stop that. I said, why? I hate that motherfucker. She said, because what if your subscribers are Trump followers? They'll cancel on you. I said, trust me when I tell you this, not a single one of my subscribers is a Trump follower. I said, because the Trump followers would not be reading something like Applied Metabolics. They don't have the intellectual capacity. There's no way they would read that. Not a chance. I have had people unfriend me on Facebook because of my Trump comments, but I don't care.
Yeah, but that's a sad commentary too on society, where no one can. If you have different, I don't care what someone's political views are. Yeah, I'm not going to dislike someone just because of that. And also, but at the same time, people should be able to express whatever their political views are as well. So if you want to express your dislike for a candidate, that's fine. Someone else can express their dislike for a candidate, that's fine. Doesn't mean those two people have to hate each other just because of that.
My feeling about that is, it's not that I hate Trump followers. It's that, because I don't even know these people. I never met them. I can't hate somebody who I never even met. But what I'm saying is, they frustrate me.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating to see people when I see them interviewed. They don't seem like they're mentally retarded. I mean, they don't seem like they have severe dementia, and yet they're saying things that are so out of this planet. I mean, they're like the Flat Earth Society. I mean, they believe the most nonsensical things, and I feel like screaming, what's wrong with you? Open your eyes. Can't you see that what you're believing is blatant lies? What's wrong with it? And it makes me frustrated. So it's more like a frustration thing than actually. And you're right, they're entitled to their opinions. I think they're completely wrong, but they're entitled to their opinions. Yeah. So that's not
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. So again, appliedmetabolics.com, by far the best source of information for everything health and fitness, anti-aging, nutrition supplements. I learned these are all big interests of mine, so I love checking out what you have to put out. It's very digestible, and it's also very non-biased because you're not trying to sell anything. And I think that's what separates you from a lot of sources too, is there's no commercial on the side. There's no promo code for anything. Even stuff you recommend, you don't necessarily recommend brands personally, because otherwise it looks like you're affiliated with that. And I think that takes a lot of restraint and discipline on your part and integrity on your part. So I think you're doing a great job.
You'll also notice I always present both sides of a picture.
Yeah.
When I write the opposing view and the other view. In other words, I let the readers decide for themselves what they want to do.
Yeah.
So I don't take a particular stand on certain, let's say, controversial issues.
Right.
I'll present both sides of the issue, and you decide.
Right.
I respect my readers enough to say, here's the information, you do with it what you want to do. That's the way I look at it.
Right. Well, that's great. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. Again, appliedmetabolics.com. Check it out.